This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 21st edition of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio. Today as our special guest, we have a former pro basketball player, a financial advisor, author, and sports management consultant, Ms. Tywanna Smith. I want to give a little background about you, Tywanna, before I start asking you all sorts of questions. Tywanna played basketball at the University of Mississippi, where she was a four-year starter. Tywanna was captain of the 2003-2004 Ole Miss team. Tywanna earned a spot on the 2003 SEC Honor Roll for her academic achievement. Tywanna got her undergraduate degree in marketing at the University of Mississippi, and she later earned a master's degree there in business administration. Tywanna, I believe, played pro basketball in Spain and the Netherlands. Tywanna started her career at Merrill Lynch. In 2016, she formed the Athletes Nexus, a sports marketing and business management business for pro athletes. Tywanna has all sorts of different athletes as clients, where she's applied her talents as a financial advisor and sports manager. Tywanna is the author of the 2017 book, Surviving the Lights, a Professional Athletes Playbook to Avoiding the Curse. I had a chance to read the book this week. It's a very readable and practical book that gives athletes advice about navigating through the world of pro sports. A lot of good advice on financial management and other subjects in her book. I advise listeners to take a look at TywannaSmith.com and theathletesnexus.com to learn more about Tywanna and her work and her book. Today we're going to learn more about Tywanna, her career, her book, and all sorts of issues that athletes encounter. Tywanna, thank you for coming on Sports and Stuff.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited. This is my favorite topic. Anytime I'm discussing something that helps athletes. So I'm really excited to be here and speak with you today.
Well, we're going to learn about some of your techniques and insights about helping athletes. I want to talk to you a little about your career and maybe some other subjects as well. You played basketball at the University of Mississippi.
I did.
How were those years?
It was wonderful. I grew up in a sports family. I had a couple of relatives that were privileged enough to make it to the NBA, and so I got an opportunity to be, front row and center for their journey, and not just the sports side of it, but the business side. And so it always intrigued me, and so to use sports to get an education and really position myself to also become a professional athlete was really cool. It was really, really great experience.
You thought your years of college basketball helped prepare you for some other things in life then?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that having that blueprint, so to speak, my cousin and family members, helped me to learn what and how to take advantage of opportunities. And I had a lot of peers that were, really just going through the motions. And I realized that happened more often than not. So I'm grateful for the experience I had prior to coming into college, so that I was prepared to, deal with the scrutiny, the pressure that came, the multitasking that was expected, but to also take advantage of the opportunities to meet and connect with people that could help me along my journey.
Well, just learning about your career, Tywanna, and your life in my pre-show research, it seems like you were probably a little more mature than probably the average college athlete playing. Tywanna, so I know you played basketball. Do I have the countries right? You played pro basketball in Spain and the Netherlands, right?
Correct. You got it.
And tell us about playing basketball in those two countries, and what is women's basketball like in Spain and the Netherlands?
Yeah, it was a really good experience. As a young girl that came up in a small town in West Memphis, Arkansas, is actually where I grew up. Didn't have a lot of money or anything. I was extremely blessed to be able to use sports to not just have a career, but to travel the world. It was, a wonderful experience, and I try to visit Europe often. Some of my clients are actually there. And it was really amazing to be among so many people that, maybe had a different view of the world and of life, and to really broaden my horizons in a sense. And it takes a special person to do that, to be mature enough to live in a different place and really embrace the culture. I learned a lot that I needed to be appreciative of, right? Things I may have taken for granted before. So it was a great learning experience. And the sports atmosphere for women internationally is on another level than the way it is here domestically in the U.S. It rivals that of the men's side. I mean, they're diehard, loyal fans. They're packing the house out, every night in, night out. And I really felt like a celebrity, I'd say, when I played in Europe. So it was really fun. They're very intense, and, it made living in another place a lot of fun.
I bet. Well, that's an interesting answer. I wasn't sure, don't know much about the women's basketball in those two countries, and I did not know that it was, in terms of popularity, comparable to men's basketball. That's very interesting. Yeah. By the way, the Tapas are pretty good in Spain, aren't they?
Yes, they are. It was, I mean, oh my gosh. Some of the other places I visited, you just kind of have to get your taste buds acclimated. But Spain was really unique. Everything I ate there was good. It was really good.
I've just been to Madrid for a couple of days. I really enjoyed it. I hope to explore more of Spain, and I spent a little time in the Netherlands as well. But those are definitely interesting countries. So, Tywanna, we have the Seattle Storm here in Seattle, and some are of the position that the Storm are the most popular of the 12 WNBA franchises. But when I read about the WNBA, Tywanna, I see that about 6 of the 12 franchises right now are losing money based on what I've learned. Do you think the WNBA will ever get really big in the U.S., or it can get more stable?
Yeah, I think it's going to definitely take some restructuring. And one thing that I'm surprised by, being that it's owned and operated in a lot of ways, by the NBA. They don't capitalize off of that synergy more, because, I mean, the NBA wins either way, right? Unless they have some structural changes to the way that they market and promote the game, then no, I don't. And if you look on the other side of it, at the collegiate level, women's sports, have a ton of support. And so something is being lost in that transition that, it's going to really, really take, some changes, some major changes in the way that people perceive and see the benefits of supporting professional women's basketball in the U.S.
This is Paul Schneiderman of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with Tywanna Smith, the author of Surviving the Lights, a Professional Athlete's Guide to Avoiding the Curse. Take a look at Tywanna's website, tywannasmith.com, where your insights about the WNBA are very reflective. And I read that the WNBA, that the players only get about 20% of the revenues, while the NBA, as part of their collective bargaining agreement, the players get about 50% of the revenues. Do you think that sort of change could maybe enhance the WNBA in some ways?
Yeah, I do. I actually have quite a few players. Most of my clients are players that play or have played NBA, NFL overseas. But over the past few years, I have had a large number of WNBA clients to reach out to me for help, trying to promote their brands and to get more stability, because just relying on the WNBA alone, and I think that's part of it. Financially, you do have challenges which make a lot of the ladies forego the allure of the status of being in the WNBA, because it's just so difficult. It's so difficult to not just make money, but get the visibility. And they'll go overseas for the reason they have the experience there that I described that I had. It's a lot more popular. You're paid a lot more money, as a female athlete in the European and international market than here domestically.
Well, like your insights, and you have some firsthand experience of having played women's pro basketball and working with current WNBA players, we're going to move on from this topic of the WNBA, but I do want to throw one more thing in here about women's basketball. There's this great documentary that takes place at my alma mater, Seattle's Roosevelt High School, about women's basketball called The Heart of the Game. Have you seen that movie, Tywanna?
I have not. I have not seen the movie, but I will make sure that I do.
Well, I wanted to throw a little plug for it. It's a great movie about women's basketball and competition, so I wanted to throw that name of that movie off to you and my listeners as well. This is Paul Schneiderman again on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with author and consultant and former pro basketball player Tywanna Smith. Okay, Tywanna, tell us how you got into the area of advising athletes with business management and other subjects.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I suffered an injury right earlier in my career when I was in high school, a season-ending injury. I tore my ACL, and I tell many people that was the best thing that could have happened to me because I saw firsthand how quickly the game could change and life could change. That sports wouldn't be a part of it. And so I always knew that I wanted to be in the business room, and in part because I just didn't grow up with a lot of money. Family was a blue collar family, and it always made me wonder about business and finance. And so that was educationally where I, got my education and academic achievements. And so, I was home training after my second season as a pro. I was approached by an alumni from my college, Ole Miss, about joining his team as a financial advisor with Merrill Lynch. It was a very easy decision for me. I had bum knees. I knew I couldn't play forever, and here I had the opportunity of a lifetime to start my career, and I knew that I wanted to start it working with athletes. Over the last 11 years as a financial advisor, planner, and in the wealth space, I found myself taking care of all of these other needs of an athlete that has allowed my role to morph into that as a business manager. I don't like to confine decisions to just financial decisions because there are a lot of business decisions that affect an athlete's success. So, I'm licensed and registered as a financial planner, but ultimately I help athletes manage their lives. So, it just happened to fill a need.
You're more multidimensional, I can tell, that with your background as a financial advisor, but your background in sports, you really got a lot of
Right.
stuff to contribute with your clients. Well, Tywanna, I did have a chance to read your book, as I mentioned in the introduction. I finished it this week, and it was a very interesting
Yay.
guide. I think I learned a lot about dilemmas athletes go through and all sorts of subjects. First of all, is it true that you wrote that book in less than 2.5 weeks?
It is true. It is true. I've always loved to read. I mean, even now I have like thousands of books that I've been saying, okay, I got to get some of these books away. I've always loved to read. That was always my hobby, even as a very young child. And so, just forming my thoughts and things of that nature really came easily to me. I always performed top 10 in my class and things like that. And so, when I sat down, I really made a checklist of things I've seen over the years that needed to be addressed. And I just started writing from there. I was pregnant at the time with my daughter, and so it was a very easy, I had a lot of time, let's say that, to put it together. But yeah, 2 weeks, and it was ready.
Boy, being pregnant as well, when you wrote that book in 2.5 weeks. Yeah, I read it when I read online as part of my pre-show research that you wrote that book in such a short time. I was like, really? That's very impressive. So this
Right,
is Paul
thank you.
Schneiderman again on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with my special guest, Tywanna Smith. So Tywanna, I want to ask you a little bit more about your book, and what's the biggest point you're trying to get across in your book, Surviving the Lights?
The biggest point I want to get across is that athletes need to be the total package, and they need to start preparing for that right now, if they haven't already, and that is athletically, that's academically, that's from a business perspective, and on and on and on. They've got to bring more to the table than just that talent and athletic ability, because that's the model thus far, and that's why I think so many fail. They make a lot of money. They get to a point that they can really change their lives, their family lives, and really enact some generational and community change. But I couldn't figure out what was wrong. Like, where would they, no pun intended, dropping the ball, so to speak? And I just think that they're just not preparing and looking at being proficient in all of those areas. And that's what they've got to do for long-term success.
Well, important stuff. The off-the-court issues athletes go through are part of the whole package for a successful athlete. Tywanna, one theme in your book is financial literacy, the whole subject of helping people do better with finances. And I've read some studies that Americans tend to not generally be very good in the area of financial literacy. I mean, yours truly has some stuff to learn as well. But I've seen poor decisions. I work as an attorney in Seattle. I've seen attorneys make some incredibly poor financial decisions. I've seen all sorts of professionals make poor decisions. But when you read about athletes, Tywanna, you mentioned this in your book, Why do you think that over 50% of NFL and NBA players end up encountering financial problems despite their pretty good salaries?
Right, right. Well, I think there are two reasons. First and foremost, they didn't grow up in a financially literate environment. Okay, and so when you've been there, and I have, you begin to think, and I covered this in the book. You begin to think that money is the answer to all those problems. You're struggling, you're facing all of this adversity and those obstacles because you don't have a lot of money. And so you begin to put money on this pedestal, right? And when you get to a point that you can make a lot of money, you think that you have arrived, not thinking about what it's going to take to keep that money. And the second part of that answer is because we are, as athletes, very emotional and passionate beings, right? Those things make us great athletes, but they make us horrible when it comes to making financial decisions, because those impulsive, emotional decisions, usually backfire because we don't understand what we're doing with it anyway, right? So I think it's a combination of those two very powerful things.
There's a psychology to it, isn't there?
Right, it is. It is, absolutely. It absolutely. It's a mental game. I say this often. It's a mental game, and sometimes athletes think, oh, yeah, I know it's a mental game on the court and on the field, but no, it's a mental game in life. It's a mental game with your money. And the way that you combat that lack of discipline is by putting in a system or a process to take that emotional aspect out of it. And so that's what I've tried to create, as a financial planner, and the model that I use, and even through what I teach in the book, is putting in processes to eliminate that lack of discipline.
Well, a lot of great insights in your book. This is Paul Schneiderman. If you're just tuning in on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with my special guest, Tywanna Smith, and I got my friend and colleague Daniel Billis as the production engineer today. Tywanna, your book focuses very heavily on athletes, but when I was reading your book, I think there's a lot of tips in there that can really help a lot of young professionals. Actually, a lot of middle-aged professionals. I mean, you have stuff in there that I think goes way beyond just assisting athletes. Have you ever thought about expanding your scope and maybe writing some books or doing some lectures on just trying to help regular laypersons with financial advice?
Right, right. And it's funny that you say that, because a part of my business model that has grown over the last 6 months has been business coaching. And working with young professionals, entrepreneurs, and even those that, just are in the business field in general, about applying some of these principles. And the way I look at it is that it's so directly related, because an athlete is business, right? There's so many things for them to market and monetize that they face the same challenges and have a lot of the same opportunities as any other business person. So absolutely, that is an area that's growing and I'm looking forward to expanding into.
Well, we'll have to stay in touch and have to learn more about what you're doing. So, Tywanna, one thing you write in your book, which is interesting, I don't want to pander to cultural stereotypes here or anything, but you write about a loyalty culture that can occur in African-American communities, about a lot of players don't want to feel like they're selling out by not helping their friends and family, and I'm sure you agree this sort of loyalty culture can occur in other cultures as well. Tell us more about this, Tywanna, and by reading your book, you're very, very leery about athletes doing business with friends and family, right?
Right, right. Oh, man, that's something I see often that I really warn against anytime you're mixing the business and personal. But, again, in my book, the statistics that I found that were most recent at the time I wrote it were, somewhere between 70 and 80% of pro athletes across basketball and football are minorities.
Right.
And about the same percentage of those grew up in poverty. Okay, various levels of it. So when you are in that space, and like I said, I had blue-collar parents. We didn't have a whole lot, so I definitely understand what that feels like. When you're down and you're looking around and the people that have had your back and that have been there to support you, even when you had nothing, and that's parents, that's family members, cousins, siblings, when you make it to the top, in our culture, we feel obligated to help one another out, to stick together. And, the sad part of that, though, is that those individuals that we're looking to assist, they've got to have that same mindset to want to do something for themselves. And most often, you find that it's not that way. They're usually mostly dead weight, to be honest. And so it's a very hard decision when you think about how important the family unit is in the African American culture, to disband that, to disconnect, to cut people loose, to distance yourself from that. However, if you're going to go to the level that you need to, it's something that you have to do if everyone is not trying to put their best self forward. You don't have to change, but I tell my clients all the time, I want you to be the best version of yourself as possible. So it's a very, very difficult emotional situation that an athlete finds himself in, and a lot of times people overlook the pressure that puts on them and how it impacts their decision making.
I bet, and I've seen it just in non-athlete circles, situations where a son or a daughter becomes very successful and the family feels, oh, well, Mary or Johnny, they're not doing anything for the family anymore. So as you mentioned,
right.
It seems to happen in a lot of different circles, that phenomenon.
Right, right. There was a football player recently that, their parent, and I wrote about it in the book, I forget his name, but his parent told him that he owed her. He owed her $1 million for raising him. And when you have a kid in that position, when they're in that position, this is one of the best moments of their lives that could change everyone's situation. And you're put into a position where you're treated as if you are, just a bank. You're only good for what you can produce. It really does something to their confidence, their self-esteem, and their ability to trust others.
Sure. Well, I want to get some more feedback from you on the whole subject of loyalty and players with requests to help their families and friends. It's very interesting. Tywanna, do you think the sports unions in the respective leagues could do more to help players with financial management and other issues?
Yes and no, right? I'm going to say yes in the fact that, there are different resources they have. However, they can make them a little bit more conducive to speak to all athletes, understanding that some of them aren't really as interested. Honestly, sometimes you have them. I've had clients that will come from the rookie transition meetings with a folder, and they're looking at me like, hey, please explain this to me because I still don't understand. So I do think that there's more they can do in this space. And at the same time, no, because the athlete bears a lot of responsibility in this process as well, to try to learn and educate themselves. I think part of the problem is that they're used to everyone doing things for them. They have got to initiate this process. They've got to show the eagerness to learn and to retain the information, and try to make better decisions themselves.
The theory of unions is to protect their membership. So I was just kind of wondering if maybe unions could be a little more hands-on, perhaps, in helping their athlete members.
Right. And I think it goes back to, a lot of the argument that you may hear politically, right? The whole separation, between having a centralized government, so to speak, where they're making all the decisions and, forcing the athletes to do certain things, versus them having a little bit more freedom to make various decisions for themselves. And I know sometimes that can be a very slippery slope. Can they do more? Yes. Will it make things more effective? Only if the athlete is willing to do their part.
I see your point on the balances there. Well, Tywanna, would you support anything requiring athletes to be more regulating their spending? For example, should there be some requirements that rookies need to put a certain amount of their money into savings? I'm just totally brainstorming with you. Do you see any ways of sort of helping to regulate young athletes more, or is that just not practical?
Yeah. I do think that they can be presented with various models. Again, how they, I think it's got to be a consistent platform, though, that everyone is sharing, because if they have some people around them and on their team that are promoting other things, ultimately, it's their money, it's their brand, it's their career. If they want to mess it up or give it away, they will find a way to do that, no matter how good the intentions of those around them. But yes, there can be more guidance in that area, because, even the whole idea of financial literacy, and as you probably have found, you can find 20,000 different financial literacy programs and tips and strategies. And for someone that doesn't know anything about that, they all can look like the answer, but it can be overwhelming to the point that it induces fear. They're intimidated, to even go through that process. So ultimately, I think that this starts earlier. It starts in college for sure. Maybe even programs for some of the high school programs. And it's why I made it a part of one that I had as well, through Surviving the Life, through my strategy system. I really tried to institute it because you got to, it's a process. They got to build up to that, and we definitely got to get to them sooner.
Well, it was up to me, and I was running American high schools. I'd want to have a financial advisor coming into every high school and talking to the kids for an hour or two about just basic financial management. Maybe we'll get there one day. Real quickly, Tywanna, we're kind of winding down, believe it or not. I can't believe how quick these interviews go sometimes. But what's your opinion on agents? Do you think all athletes should have an agent?
I'm going to say yes and no. It depends on the athlete. For an athlete that talent-wise, maybe borderline, or maybe needs a shot, needs a little help getting some exposure, the connections of an agent can help. However, for athletes that really make it their business to learn about the business, about the CBA, and some of the protections they're already granted, and you find a lot of athletes doing this. They are foregoing having an agent and representing themselves, or at least having an attorney, right? Because we see a lot of attorney agents that are entering the space who are primarily,
Sure.
lawyers and that sort of thing, but they are certified to negotiate contracts. Just making sure they're protected from a legal standpoint, that has an hourly rate or a retainer, which you can always use an attorney as an athlete, versus a commission that could jeopardize, or create a conflict of interest. So it just kind of depends on the athlete and how versed they are about the business.
Well, real quickly, Tywanna, before I ask you about what you see in your future, there's an old line in the law, a lawyer representing himself as a fool for a client. I suppose sometimes an athlete trying to do it all on his or her own can be difficult as well. But Tywanna,
Yes.
What does the future hold for Tywanna Smith? We're wrapping up here. We have less than a minute.
Yeah. So I am looking forward to making some huge changes in the sports realm where we really shift the balance of power to the athlete. Whether it's about money, whether it's about their brand, whether it's about their careers, really help them come to the table, understanding the power they bring as the talent in this whole situation to prevent a lot of the exploitation and failures beyond the game.
Well, Tywanna, thank you so much for coming on Sports and Stuff. Let's stay in touch, and I think you had some great information in your unique field to add today. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you. I
take care.
appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.